What's up guys, this is your friend Shinobi Addict 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Fem Sasuke, Mikoto, Hinata, Ino, Tenten and Anko fell for Naruto? Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more fanfic like this. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto. Are you okay? You spaced out for a moment. Mikoto looked at him worriedly as he just stood in the doorway looking at them with a blank stare. He shook his head clear and waved off to the two. Yeah, just got lost for a moment there in thought, I'll go change. Mikoto and Sasuke glanced at each other and shrugged it off. Naruto still took some figuring out. Ka-san, what will you be doing during school today? Sasuke asked, which surprised Mikoto. Generally the girl had just accepted that Mikoto was quite busy with meetings and such. I have another meeting with the elders to review your engagement with Naruto. Sasuke's eyes widened and she blushed from the reminder, uncharacteristic of her usual stoic behavior. I might also get some information about which squad you're in and who your sensei will be. She hoped to arouse her daughter's interests but received nothing but a glance. She is still trying to keep her thoughts off the subject. She is nervous they won't be on a team together because of their place in the class. Naruto was ranked second to Sasuke amongst the other class of around 20 other academy students, making it seem as if the two would be spread amongst teams to keep the skill level high. However, Mikoto had a good feeling that the two would be together for numerous reasons, one amongst them mother instinct. And the elders would jump at the chance to have them be close at all times at the very least if the two end up having a child earlier end scheduled. Not that Mikoto thought that either would do so, but they would enjoy each other's company in comparison to the rest of the class. Alright, Naruto yelled in a rambunctious voice as he opened the door with a new black Uchiha collar shirt and a big smile. You ready to go, Suki-chan? A bowl of half-eaten rice was his answer as the annoyed girl walked past him and toward the front door. What did I tell you about the name? It was his pet name for her, like Miko-chan, but Sasuke was embarrassed by it and tried to make him stop. Secretly he knew she loved it as he saw her blush many a time when they were alone, but he often did it just to tease her. He quickly began to pick up the rice so he could catch up, but a soft hand grabbed his, making him stop and look to see his smiling mother. Go on, Naruto, I don't want you late for school. My meeting doesn't start for a while anyway. Naruto looked unsure, but with an embarrassing peck on his cheek the blonde ran out of the house to catch up with his annoyed sister. Mikoto laughed as she picked up the food. He was too easy to tease. 000. Konohagakure. Ninja Academy. The two Uchiha made it on time, surprising with how much time they wasted at home. As they entered the schoolyard, a combination of Sasuke's presence and the Uchiha crest brought eyes toward them. The rumor mill began to spin as it did every day as Naruto and Sasuke walked closely with one another, practically holding hands. It wasn't that there was some rules they couldn't reveal their relationship to the other kids or anything, they were just still embarrassed. The explaining that both didn't want to do along with obvious comments made about them afterward were most easily kept at bay by keeping a certain distance from one another until they were ready. Nonetheless, it didn't stop the word from spreading. Uchiha Sasuke and Naruto. They awfully look close for brother and sister. Why didn't they tell anyone they were related? I had to find out from my 2-san. Almost looks like they're going out, she is way too good for him. Quote, I wish I was Naruto, he doesn't deserve that. Sasuke is so amazing, too bad her image is wrecked when the blonde stays so close by. Naruto's Uchiha name didn't stop people from despising him, it just gave them more varied reasons. Whether it be from jealousy, hatred of the Nine Tails, or even envy of skills or stature, Naruto was still a target. He didn't mind it so much as he grew up with it half of his life. Sasuke on the other hand still got annoyed. You shouldn't have to take that, Naruto. She mumbled, wondering if he could even hear her as they entered the classroom away from most of the kids. It's okay, Sasuke. Naruto wrapped an arm around her shoulders and brought her in for a hug, making her blush as a few other seated kids saw. As long as I have you and Ka-san, I don't care what they say. Sasuke didn't push him away like she used to. Instead, she liked this warm feeling inside her when they were close. Naruto was waiting for her to get angry and push him away, but instead she leaned in closer and gave a happy sigh as she closed her eyes dreamily. I guess so. Baka. Naruto blushed as they parted a bit to sit down in their chairs, next to one another in the far-off left corner of the class, mostly just to discourage kids from coming close to them. Sasuke got out of her daze as Naruto's arm left her to sit down, and she quickly assumed her usual position, eyes front and hands interlaced, giving her a bored look. This suited her because it kept boys away and let the teacher know she was still paying attention, even when she wasn't. All right, class, get seated. Iruka and Mizuki entered, both with clipboards that would no doubt be used for their final test grading. The kids scrambled to find their seats. A few boys glanced over at the Uchiha to see Naruto's impenetrable defense of Sasuke still remained. She sat on the far chair, with the wall right next to her, and he took the middle, preventing anyone else from sitting by her. The worst part was she never gave any thought or sympathy to them when they wanted to sit by her, instead allowing her brother to do as he pleased. A few girls did in fact like Naruto, but were too scared Sasuke would do something or too nervous to do anything about it. They also figured out along with the boys that whether they were siblings or not, the two did not seem interested in anything else other than each other whenever they were seen. Iruka surveyed the class to ensure they were all quiet and listening, landing on the Uchiha pair with a small smirk. The two were sure to ace the test with their grades, and it would be his honor to pass them after the hard work they put in, no matter how much they acted like it was just simple chore. I don't know what kind of training Mikoto Uchiha-sama does to them to make them so at ease with our training regimen, but it definitely shows. They have no one even close to their scores in academics or ninja training. Single quote. In all honesty, they could have graduated early, but the Hokage requested they stay in for the full run along with permission from Mikoto. Whatever reason they wanted them to stay with the class was beyond Iruka, but there were admittedly few who could be a match for them as a teammate. Today we will finish the three-part graduation exam as we finished taking the written exam on Monday, the ninja tool exercise yesterday, and now for your jutsu test today. Those who pass with overall acceptable scores and perform to at least a 70% in each category will be allowed to move on and graduate from the academy. The usual excited murmurs came up and Iruka waved them off as he indicated a door near the chalkboard. The test will take place in there where Mizuki and I will test you on the Bunshin Jutsu. Mizuki just finished writing the order of students to come up on the chalkboard as the two prepared to depart. Please follow the order Mizuki-sensei has written on the board. First student Shino Aburame, please come with us to the testing area. Shino felt eyes on him as he slowly got up and followed the teachers into the room, leaving the rest to their thoughts. The usual glances made no surprise to the Uchiha as they waited patiently. Naruto emulated Sasuke's serious pose in an attempt to annoy her, and he realized it was working as she sent him a glare. Idiot. You know why I try and look serious all the time? Naruto smiled and brought his arm around her again to tease her, making all eyes tune to the area immediately. Of course, Sasuke-chan, but I don't like you being serious all the time. I like seeing you smile too. She blushed and allowed him to pull her closer for a hug. The moment ended when they both felt they weren't alone. Naruto looked behind him to see a boy from their class, Hibachi, standing in the aisle with crossed arms and an annoyed but look on his face. The only way they remembered who he was because of two things, his bandana and the fact that he didn't like Naruto because he was always with Sasuke. To her, he was nothing. To him, it was his ticket to popularity to date her and become the next boy Uchiha. Naruto was always in his way though, and when he saw her smile when he put his arm around her, Hibachi decided now was the time to make a move while the teachers were out. Hey you, back off her, he said with a tough guy voice, but failed when Naruto and Sasuke heard him squeak as the Uchiha turned to glare at him. She's my family, you don't have a say in what we do. Sasuke liked the way Naruto spoke with an edge to his voice, especially since he was defending her. Why yeah, well, she didn't look too happy about it. Hibachi defended with a stutter, feeling the class begin to snicker behind his back. What do you want? Sasuke asked with an attitude. He was annoying her when she was about to get closer to Naruto during class. Sasuke-san, I think that since we're both gonna be genin soon and that means we both will be strong, it's time I ask you out on a date. Drop this loser of a brother. Naruto's glare intensified as he paused before continuing in a mumble. And go out with me. Sasuke wanted to roll her eyes. If the guy thought she would pity him, he was very wrong. Whether he knew it or not, Sasuke was taken and she didn't even know the kid to begin with, so she decided to let Naruto handle it. Naru-kun, get rid of him for me. Naruto smirked, never taking his eyes off of Hibachi as he stood up and cracked his knuckles. You got it, Suki-chan. Any requests? The class fell deathly silent as Hibachi began to shake in fear. They were being serious, weren't they? He got rejected and he was going to get beat up in the same day. Not if he had anything to say about it. I'm not afraid of you. He took a basic stance of defense as Sasuke's deadly smirk unnerved him as she gave Naruto one rule. No blood on me. Naruto took a step forward, making the boy flinch. He took a long stride, so he was now crouching low under Hibachi's body and sent a single uppercut right into his jaw. The boy felt pain as he momentarily was lifted off the ground and then sent flying across a desk when Naruto kicked him in the stomach. He landed on the other side of the room and, trying his best to nurse his pride, dragged himself back to his seat as Naruto returned to his spot with Sasuke. Nice, Naruto. But the kick was a little too much for him, I think. Naruto scratched the back of his head, displaying a carefree smile, weirding some out after he showed such an evil smirk before. Sorry. Guess I forgot my own strength. Sasuke just shook her head in disbelief and returned to her world of boredom until they were called in. It was obvious of their outcome though to everyone in the school. The Uchiha had passed their final test. 000. Kanahagakure. Hokage's mansion. Office. And so you still remember the terms to our agreement, Uchiha Dono. The elders and Hokage were once again with Mikoto in a meeting, basically to review on their past agreements. Yes, elders. She sighed in exasperation. The amount of times they asked that over the past few years and they still thought she would conveniently forget. I know the terms of the CRA. Sasuke must have a child by 16 and myself by Naruto's age of 18. The elders nodded and was glad she remembered. A shame that boy did not take to the transplant. The Sharingan could have strengthened him further. Mikoto was actually somewhat happy compared to their disappointment. It meant Naruto would still be normal. A set of Sharingan eyes were not exactly subtle, especially to his classmates. If the transplant had worked, she would have definitely encouraged Naruto to hide them to keep his strength safe. But thoughts of it didn't matter much as they were past that opportunity. Moving on. I'm sure Mikoto Dono would appreciate a break from the usual questioning you two give her. The Hokage stepped in after the silence, ignoring the glares sent by his teammates. It came to my attention that you wanted to see the finalized list of teams, is that correct? Mikoto nodded. She was quite anxious to see exactly who her children ended up with, although she was surely not going to be surprised after the amount of recommendations she gave the Hokage. Truthfully, there was only one Jonin who had the qualifications to push them to their limits and further train Sasuke's dojutsu. Hitaki Kakashi. As you requested and I supported, Jonin Hitaki Kakashi has been appointed to lead Team 7. The squad consists of Sasuke, Naruto, and Shino Aburame. Mikoto thought over the Aburame boy. She didn't suggest him, but it wasn't a bad choice. Her children excelled in ninjutsu and taijutsu. Combine the offensive power with the Aburame's brains and hidden clan jutsu and they would make a deadly combination. A hybrid of tracking and offense. A kill team is what she likened it to. The Aburame. Odd choice, Hiruzen. Kaharu muttered as she tried to figure out the Hokage's choice in the third member. Hiruzen merely shrugged and gave a who knows smile. They could get along very well together as I see particular links in their personalities, as well as having a good combination of skills that will make them a lethal force as they grow. Under Kakashi's tutelage, I have no doubt they will be the strongest if not most successful team Konoha produces for many years to come. Mikoto was glad to hear his praise of her children, sensing no deception in his words as she often found with the empty compliments of the elders. She almost preferred Danzo, at least he told her straight up they hated each other. Better than doing it behind her back. 000. Konohagakure. Streets. Sunset. Naruto had taken Sasuke on their first official date to celebrate graduation. In reality, it was just a fun little lunch they had together. After they got out of school, the two really felt their awkwardness disappear as they just spent time together eating out at the small restaurant together without parental supervision and the feeling of being suddenly a lot older than they really were. The reactions from the populace who saw them together was relatively positive. Many of the younger townsfolk saw them as a cute couple and younger boys and girls swooned in jealousy of their pair. Even then, some ninja and older civilians who remembered the attack clearly still saw Naruto as the nin. E-tails and refused to acknowledge the heiress would choose such a thing to be with. Naruto was walking along with Sasuke, who had her hands hidden in her pockets and her hair swaying behind her as they made their way home. Naruto was just looking up at the sky with an odd, thoughtful face as they walked along, and Sasuke was somewhat annoyed that he was paying more attention to the sky than her. They had just gotten off their first date as much as he didn't consider it one, and now he wouldn't even hold her hand home. She took a daring glance at his as it hung limply at his sides, swaying back and forth a bit with each step. A blush crept over her face as she took her right hand out of her pocket and made for a grab. I don't really know why, but I just don't care what people say when they see us holding hands. I just want him to hold me a little closer. Just before she could grab his hand and take it in hers, he stopped walking, making her just brush against it. Naruto looked into the sky again as he didn't even notice Sasuke's actions. His instincts had been right, there was something very wrong. Bathed in a sheen of orange and with a bit of glare, Mizuki was very difficult for Naruto to see off in the distance, but the boy could see the large scroll on high. Back. It seemed like their teacher was making a late withdrawal from the Hokage mansion and no one was trying to stop him. Naruto. What's the matter? Sasuke was getting a bit worried as well as annoyed. He rarely acted like this and it was scaring her. Naruto looked at her for what felt like the first time since they left their date spot, and she could easily tell his fake smile from his real one. Naruto didn't want to freak her out and decided he would investigate alone. It was probably nothing anyway. It's nothing, I just remembered something I had to get. Go on ahead and welcome Ka-san. Tell her I'll give her a back rub when I get back. Sasuke was confused and angry as he jumped away into the lowering sun as night began to fall. Why did Naruto show her his fake smile? He hasn't done that since we were little. He would give that smile when they would walk the streets and people would glare at him. She would ask and he would just smile and shrug it off. With age, Sasuke could tell hate from the look, but Naruto still would not admit to anything. Mikoto acted as if there was nothing to talk about, but she sensed the two knew more than they let on. I'm not letting you do whatever you're doing alone, Naruto. Sasuke jumped off after him, hoping she could catch up in time. 000. Konohagakure outskirts. Abandoned shed. Mizuki landed with ease at his hideout and with an unbridled smirk unstrapped the large scroll on his back. His plunder was too easy to get as the guards had become lax at the end of the day, allowing him to sneak into the archives without much fuss. He wondered if he could risk a peek to learn a technique or two for himself, of course to strengthen his bond with his soon-to-be leader, Orochimaru. This was his key for power, but both opportunities offered something great of value. His thoughts of grandeur were cut off when he sensed a new presence and turned to see the Uchiha. It seemed as if the kid was really following him after all. He had hoped it was just nerves, but the blonde was as good as they say and the kid deserved praise. That was if Mizuki really cared about being his teacher, which he obviously didn't. With the 9 tails in his grasp, he could kill or capture him to further Orochimaru's power. Everything seemed to be going his way today. Mizuki's sickening smirk seemed to confirm what Naruto feared, as it seemed the teacher had cracked, either becoming a traitor or going insane for power. Either way, there was no way he was supposed to have the scroll of sealing, and it was Naruto's duty as a genin of Konoha to stop him. That was what he had earned the headband for, that now was worn proudly on his forehead. Ah. So the Kyuubi brat decides to be the village hero and show up. Naruto stiffened. That was the first time anyone had directly referred to him in relation with Kyuubi. Even though he knew the beast was inside him, it didn't make things any easier on him to hear that. Unfortunately, Mizuki noticed the change in stance and decided to press the wound. Oh, surprised I know that, Naruto. Everyone knows. Your friends, your teachers, the ninja who pretend to protect you, even the Hokage. And they all hate you for it. His venom seeped into Naruto's veins and he felt on fire with anger and fear. Was that really why he felt so separated? Could people hate him so much that they would exile him to a life of solitude even as a child? The answer became all too clear to him as Naruto brought a hand to his face, now embattled with his own inner conflict. Mizuki stalked forward as he was ready to point the dagger at the boy's heart, the Uchiha. Did you think Mikoto-san didn't know? Of course she knew. The Uchiha died to Kyuubi just as well as any other ninja, and they hated you for it too. Even now she took you in because she pitied you. Maybe she planned to kill you but developed some sick sense of humor in keeping you as her pet. Naruto sunk to his knees. This was too much for him to think about. Stop it. Stop it, please. Mizuki undid the strap on his large shuriken attached to his back and began to work it into a spin as he Till approached with that sickening smirk. And don't even get me started on your precious sister Sasuke. She'll throw you away faster than I can throw th. Stop it. Or what, Kyuubi boy? Let's see you stop this. Mizuki let loose the shuriken, tired of his game as he realized the boy was already broken. He sobbed on the ground and did not make to avoid the shuriken. Naruto, snap out of it. He looked up to see Sasuke holding the shuriken in place, one hand in the center wheel while the other rested comfo. Rtably on one of the blades. His sister had stopped the killing blow to the Kyuubi boy. Why did she? Naruto then saw her stiffen up a bit and grunt in pain. Both hands were laced with blood as it trickled down her fingers to the ground. She had caught the shuriken initially with her hands on the blades due to a bad angle in her positioning, but it was the only way she could see in saving Naruto. She had heard all of what Mizuki said, even the part describing Naruto as Kyuubi. There were a few things she didn't understand still, like how Naruto had Kyuubi inside him and what that meant for him, but she did know that what he was saying about her and Mikoto wasn't true. They loved Naruto no matter who or what he was. They were family, and that was tighter than any other bond. Sasuke. Why? She heard him croak out the question in mid-sob. I'm the keeper of a monster. I don't deserve this. Sasuke frowned. He was so vulnerable right now after Mizuki's barrage. She would think it cute if the situation was different. Naruto. He looked at her and saw her flashing him a confident smile, very rare of Sasuke to do. The last time she did that was when Naruto mastered the fireball technique at the pier. That was the day he had become a true Uchiha. Mikoto and Sasuke were so proud, and he had never felt closer to them afterward. Now it seemed that smile was his salvation in the face of defeat. That's what brothers and sisters are supposed to do, because we're family. Naruto couldn't believe she said that. It reminded him of the past times she had said the same thing. Mizuki just stood there, annoyed at how she brought him back from the brink with just a few words. Besides, she turned back to glare at Mizuki, signaling their fight was back on. If my baka of a fiancé goes and gets himself killed, who will I marry then? Damn brat, is that all you can do is talk? Sasuke smirked and readied the shuriken to throw back at him with just as much ferocity as when it was first used. You should know, sensei. You tested me after all. 000. Well, That chapter is done and I left off with a "I'm sure to be killer Cliffy. Sorry, but it just felt right to leave off there, and besides I've got things to do and people to see. Our bonds are stronger. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto. Speaking. Thinking. Jutsu. Tailed beast speak. Naruto's Sasuke's Mikoto. Age alert. Just to let everyone know where we stand, Sasuke and Naruto are now age 13, normal age during time frame, and Mikoto is 33. Mikoto has been made younger for our purposes in this story. Time frame. Naruto and Sasuke are now nearing the completion of the academy while Mikoto remained in maternal leave to allow herself time to deal with the Uchiha clan's maintenance. What's up guys, I'm here with a new chapter. And yes, I know about last chapter's ending and how it didn't go over so well. I think it was because I rushed it. I should have led into it a bit more subtly instead of pushing it all in that one spot of a few sentences, but I was in a rush. At least you got where I went with it though. Naruto was mentally vulnerable after what Mizuki said, and Sasuke helped allay those fears. If you are also a reader of Birth of N, I have a poll on my profile that pertains to the story. Please go vote. 000. Konohagakure outskirts. Abandoned shed. Mizuki glared at Sasuke. Who was she to speak so high and mighty to him? An instructor at Konoha Academy, a Chunin ninja and one of Orochimaru's future chosen. It was blasphemy. He would teach her a lesson for getting in his way with the demon brat. The fight would have to be quick though. No doubt the village was on alert by now with the stolen scroll. Sasuke stood in front of the prone Naruto in a defensive position in case the man tried to get at him again. She didn't know what his angle was attacking Naruto's emotions like that, but he would pay for it. There was no way this man, not even a Chunin of the Leaf, could beat an Uchiha prodigy like her, or Naruto for that matter. It would be over quick and the two could go back to the village as heroes. Naruto didn't know what to do. He willed his body to move, to stand with Sasuke, but it wouldn't. Damn these feelings. I can't move. Single quote. I'm leaving right now. This is your chance to step back and forget you saw me. Take it. Or don't. Mizuki threatened, hoping to scare them. It only served to anger Sasuke further. How dare you say that after what you did to Naruto? I won't let you get away for that. Sasuke exclaimed, getting into a battle-ready stance. Mizuki gritted his teeth. It seemed as though he wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. He readied another giant shuriken and gripped it tightly in his left hand. He made a sudden dash forward toward the two Uchiha and made the shuriken spin into a mighty whirlwind, increasing its piercing strength. Sasuke brought her own shuriken up to defend against his diagonal slash but was shocked to see the weapon break under pressure. She rolled out of the way but was quickly forced back on the defensive as Mizuki threw the large shuriken at her, forcing her to jump backward toward the shed. Mizuki knew that would be too easy for the girl to dodge, so he grabbed a few more small shuriken from his pack and launched them at the spot where the girl would land. That should be enough to keep her occupied. A sudden new presence forced him to look toward the trees as he noticed the green of a Konoha flak vest and knew that he had been caught. Damn. Mizuki leapt backward and threw a kunai at Naruto. It wasn't clear whether he wanted to wound Naruto, or to keep the new arrival distracted. Naruto watched as if in slow motion as the kunai flew toward him. A piece of paper whistled in the wind as it was strung to the kunai. An explosive tag, he thought absently, not realizing just how dangerous the weapon was. His eyes widened as it got closer and a bright white light blinded him and forced his eyes shut. A scream echoed through the trees as night fell on the forest. 000. Naruto quickly opened his eyes to see that he was indeed alive. The attack intended for him had missed its mark. The result was obvious though. A small crater was still smoldering a few feet away from him. Foreign hands were over his head and a larger body was covering his own in protection. Iruka checked Naruto with his own eyes to see that the boy was alright, if not a bit shell-shocked from the blast. At the last moment, Iruka had landed next to Naruto and deflected the weapon into an angled arc, making it hit the ground away from them as he pushed Naruto the ground. While there wasn't much time to pay attention, he did remember a scream as the blast went off and quickly checked his surroundings. What he saw made him gasp in terror. Sasuke was up against the shed's wall, a few shurikens surrounded her on the ground, those were the ones she had time to deflect. The large shuriken had embedded itself in the wall, keeping one of her arms pinned between two of its blades but otherwise not harming her. Two more smaller shuriken had dug their teeth into her opposite shoulder and leg, immobilizing her. The scream was a combination of pain that she had not experienced before and seeing the hostile weapon get close to Naruto. As Sasuke looked at the scene in front of her now, a flood of relief washed over her seeing Naruto alive and well. Iruka quickly ran over to her and removed the large shuriken from the wall, sending splinters out toward the man and the ground. The next two were tricky as he did not want to harm the Uchiha and his student, but he knew that it wasn't good to leave them in or they would only further wound her with movement. Hang on Sasuke-san. I'm going to remove the shuriken. It will hurt. Sasuke just glared at him and he quickly began as Naruto picked himself up and ran over to join his teacher and sister. Groans ensued as the two bloody weapons were removed and thrown to the ground, leaving Sasuke bleeding and Naruto even worse off than before. It was his fault she had those wounds and a sense of guilt and anger festered inside of him. His body had been in shock and wouldn't move, but it was his fault he did not snap out of the fugue sooner to stop Mizuki that his sister-in-love was hurt. He couldn't take back what had happened, but he could get revenge. Right now. Mizuki got away. Sasuke grunted, looking in the direction he took off. Iruka looked at the girl, amazed she was still in the mood to fight with her challenging tone. With her wounds though, she would only hinder herself in battle and make them worse. Reinforcements could be alerted at the village once he took her to the hospital, but they wouldn't find him in time. It looked like he would have to send Naruto with Sasuke while he pursued his former friend, alone. Iruka was once again cut off as the boy looked at him with what he could only tell was a look of revenge. Sensei. Please take my sister to the hospital. I will pursue Mizuki and retrieve the scroll of sealing. Naruto looked at Sasuke and saw concern in her eyes even if she was the one wounded. But Naruto, you can't take him on alone. You aren't in the condition to. Naruto gave her a knowing look and she quieted down. Something in his eyes told her to calm down, to trust him, so she obeyed. It's my fault you got hurt Sasuke. You had to protect me while I couldn't do anything to save you. Now I have to finish what I started, stop Mizuki. And make him pay for hurting you. Sasuke blushed as Iruka almost fell over at the sudden turn of events. What happened to a simple situation? Naruto, you don't have the skill level required to fight Mizuki. He's a Chunin and you are just barely a genin graduate from the academy. I know him personally and all of his skills, plus my judgment isn't clouded with revenge. Naruto glared at his sensei. He was right but that didn't stop him from knowing he had to take that guy down. I'm sorry sensei, but I'm the one that caught up to Mizuki first. I started this, and I'm going to finish it too. We don't have time to argue and my sister needs treatment. I'll be back soon. Naruto leapt off into the trees with Iruka and Sasuke watching him leave, powerless to stop him. Hey Naru. The boy was already gone so Iruka resorted to shouting his last order. Alright, but I'm on my way back as soon as I drop Sasuke off. He looked back at the girl and knelt down, offering his shoulder. Sasuke looped her unwounded arm over his back and felt him grab her around the waist to support her. Her brother was going off to get revenge and she was forced to head back to the village. Naruto might not be able to forgive himself for what happened to her, but it would be the same if he got hurt. Or killed going off because of Sasuke's wounds. With no way of being there with him physically, Sasuke settled for a prayer as they began their trek to the village. Stay safe, Naruto. 000. Konohagakure. Mikoto was still inside the compound, going over some papers when she felt someone coming. The pounding at the gate let her know the guest had arrived and she quickly went to see what they could want at such a late hour. Her children were still not home, but she wasn't too concerned as they were most likely with one another wherever they were. Arriving at the gate, Mikoto opened it to find a Chunin heavily breathing from jumping around place to place. It was his job to get the word out about the missing scroll and recruit ninja to help search for it. He had no idea about the missing Uchiha children and what he was in store for in the Uchiha compound. All he knew was the Hokage's order and that the Uchiha were quite capable ninja, from the ones that were left that was. Yes, what is it? Mikoto didn't know the young man's name in particular but stayed polite. It had to be urgent if they were coming at this odd hour. A slight moment of fear crept over her thinking of the children, but she brushed it aside. Uchiha-san, the Hokage has put out a general alert within the village. The scroll of sealing has been stolen and we need help tracking down the one who took it. The guards along the wall have not said of anyone trying to escape, so we figure he's still within the village somewhere. Would you please help us search? Mikoto was shocked such an important artifact could be stolen right from under the Hokage, but knew the gravity of the situation. If those jutsu got out, it would make the world a lot more dangerous than it already was. Yes, I will begin searching as soon as I get in proper dress. Please excuse me. The Chunin nodded and jumped off into the night to alert others while Mikoto headed back to her home to change. Her usual attire was of her apron with a shirt and pants underneath, nothing special. It had been a while since Mikoto had worn her ninja gear, but this situation she felt required it. Besides, she was a Junin of the village and should every once in a while remind herself and everyone else of the Fa. Court. Within her bedroom was where she kept her old ninja gear, where she had left it the day she retired to take care of Sasuke. Mikoto undressed herself down to her black panties and quickly grabbed her black tank top, a tight sleeveless with the Uchiha fan on the back. Next she put on the standard Junin flak vest. It completely covered the top underneath but let her cleavage breathe as she unzipped it a bit. Her pants were a standard affair, dark blue with a pair of sandals to complete the outfit. Any ninja tool she needed was already packed in her hip pouch and Mikoto was ready to go. She left the gate closed behind her as she began to jump across the village, searching for anything suspicious. In the back of her mind she was also keeping her eye out for Sasuke and Naruto. Those two weren't as disciplined as the older ninja, but they could still help search. Without much to go on their suspect though, Mikoto had no idea where to look or who she was looking for. Well, if I had to guess, they probably aren't in town anymore. The other Junin would have searched there already and it would be too obvious. The scroll must be in the forest somewhere. Mikoto stopped on a rooftop to take in her surroundings before she would move on. Around her, blurs in the night could be seen as shinobi desperately searched for the thief. Even in the darkness of Konoha, Mikoto could make out the lavender eyes of Hyuga search parties using their infamous Byakugan Kekkei Genkai. With them on the search it surely wouldn't take much longer, and once she saw the Inoshika Cho senior group running through the village she realized how serious the situation was to everyone. No sense standing around. Mikoto leapt off again in search of the culprit but felt a certain amount of hopelessness in her search. What made her have any better chance of finding him than a Hyuga? A blast of wind made her hair whip back as an Anbu squad landed on the rooftop she was on. They ran past her to their next destination, not paying her too much mind. The squad leader just gave the clan head a courteous nod before she leapt off after her squad. Sorry Uchiha-sama, were her parting words in startling Mikoto when they arrived. She cursed herself, getting jumpy over something so simple. Mikoto moved again, this time closer to the center of the city where the Hokage mansion was. Maybe the culprit had come back to survey their crime. That was what Fugaku had told her was one of the most common mistakes a criminal made. Instead of seeing a criminal though, she saw what she never wanted to see. Sasuke was on the back of a Chunin. She knew him as Iruka. He was their homeroom teacher and had just recently approved their graduation to genin. While this fact alone worried her, even from their distance of a dozen buildings or so she could make out some cuts or wounds on her daughter. This made her act on reflex and move to check on her herself as the mother. Sasuke. Iruka touched down and saw an incoming figure. To his surprise, it was the girl's mother and head of the Uchiha clan. And she looked like she was about to kill something. Sasuke looked up from Iruka's shoulder to see who called her name. Instantaneously she was surprised to see her mother coming toward her. Iruka let her down and allowed the wounded girl to go to her mother's arms where she belonged. The Chunin smiled for a moment as the two met and embraced. That was one good ending to the night. Oh Sasuke. I thought the worst when I saw you on Iruka's back. Mikoto rubbed her daughter's back and desperately held on, afraid she would lose her if she let go. Sasuke was glad her mother was concerned, but she was losing feeling in her body from her mother squeezing along with pain from the wounds. Mother. If you keep squeezing me, it might make these worse. Mikoto realized she was speaking of her wounds and immediately backed off with a layer of concern. Touching her. Her eyes widened at the latest realization. Where is Naruto? Where is my son? Where is Naruto? Sasuke looked depressed for a moment and hesitated in answering, making Mikoto's fears go wild in her mind. Iruka was quick to jump in. He pursued Mizuki, Mikoto-sama. He is the thief of the scroll of sealing and the one who did this to your daughter. I wasn't able to stop him, so I decided to bring Sasuke back to the hospital and go after him once I was done. Mikoto took a deep breath and processed the information. It was better than what she had first thought. Iruka, please go and bring Naruto to me. I know my children are ninja now. But we both know that there are opponents that they just can't handle. I almost lost Sasuke and I don't want to lose Naruto over a scroll. Iruka nodded and took one last concerned look at Sasuke. The girl seemed to have trouble with her wounds still untreated. Mikoto read his thoughts and allayed them. Don't worry, I will be taking my daughter to the hospital right after this. You can bring Naruto there when you get him. And then I will have a stern talk for both of you. She left the sentence on a hard note as she looked at Sasuke, who could only look to the ground in embarrassment. Iruka sent a sympathetic smile her way before leaping off the building toward the forest to find Naruto. It hadn't been too long since they had separated, so Iruka was hopeful that he could find them both in time. If he didn't, well, he didn't want to know how Mikoto would react to such news. Naruto may not have been seen as an Uchiha by most of the populace, but Mikoto acted like he was her flesh and blood. Mikoto watched him leave before getting her daughter situated on her back, as it seemed her leg wasn't good enough to jump on anymore. Hang on Sasuke, we're going. The woman felt her daughter nod into her back as her arms looped around her neck. Mikoto began to make her way to the hospital, albeit at a slower pace now. There were many questions she wanted to ask but knew better than to make her daughter feel even worse. What were you two doing before you decided to chase after Mizuki? She suddenly asked, not so sure she herself knew why. Sasuke thought back to earlier that day, after they had chosen their headbands and been told they had passed their exam. Naruto chose black and I chose blue. Everyone looked so jealous of how good we looked together. Single quote. We went on a date. To celebrate graduating. She added the last part as an afterthought to comfort her mother because she jumped at the word of date. Mikoto was surprised they were moving that fast in their relationship. She still thought of them as children playing at the thought of being together. Then again, Mikoto had no real grasp on real relationships. She and Fugaku had been promised to each other at a later age and were producing heirs when they should have been dating and having fun. Either way, she was happy that they were getting along so well. I see. How was he? Sasuke recognized the tenderness in her mother's voice, something she only heard when she was interested or approved of something, with a smile. That was when she knew her mother was smiling, and she began to smile too. He was wonderful, Ka-san. Everything I wanted him to be when I dreamed about the future when we were young. But I was kind of disappointed at the end of it. Mikoto felt her daughter frown and wondered what happened. What? Did he do something wrong? Sasuke just shook her head. I wanted to hold hands but Then he saw Mizuki and started this whole mess. I guess I was being selfish to want to hold his hand in front of everybody. Mikoto actually felt like laughing but kept it in. Oh, don't worry, Suki-chan. There will be plenty of chances in the future to hold his hand, especially in front of everyone in Konoha. Her daughter calmed at that, and it wasn't long before they arrived at the hospital. The doctors and nurses were taken a bit by surprise but quickly set the Uchiha up with their own medical suite and began to heal Sasuke immediately. While her injuries were somewhat serious, they were nowhere near life-threatening, and it wasn't long before the girl was better than before. Mikoto insisted she rest a while since they had to wait for Naruto arrive anyway. Mikoto stared out the window of their room, tapping lightly on the wall as she waited for any sign of their arrival. Her tapping steadily increased as her stress grew. This was no laughing matter to her. Naruto was as loved in the Uchiha household as any pureblood, son or daughter, tailed beast or no. To have him out of her sight, in danger, was a difficult feeling to grasp. She knew she would have to get used to the fact he was a ninja now. Missions to far-off nations and even wars to fight in were not outside of his grasp anymore, and they were something he would have to face alone. No, she corrected herself with a glance to Sasuke. They will face them together. Single quote. A light knock on the door made both Uchiha turn to see the Hokage enter with a few Anbu. Mikoto tensed on reflex but relaxed as the old man smiled and walked up to her, grasping her shoulder in comfort as the Anbu took up defensive positions at the door. I heard what happened from a messenger Iruka ran into on his way to Naruto. I thought it best to wait here for his victorious return so I could congratulate and reward him for his job well done. Mikoto smiled at his thoughtfulness but then had a quizzical look. Reward him? Hiruzen turned to see Sasuke weakly stare at him, trying her best to stay awake for when Naruto would return. He walked over and gently took her hand in his, giving her a slight grip to keep her awake. Thank you for what you did as well, Sasuke-chan. If it wasn't for you, Naruto would never have gotten over his insecurities of being a Jinchuriki, nor would he have become a strong ninja like his parents. You are in my debt for taking care of him. As are you, Mikoto. He looked back at the mother and saw her confused look, which he sought to fix. You see, Mikoto. There are a few things about Naruto and his past that you should know. Or if you haven't already guessed them, allow me to confirm them. To start with. And then Hiruzen enlightened the two Uchiha on Naruto's real past, just who was behind the making of what could be someday the strongest ninja in Konoha. At the end of it, their eyes felt more open than before and their respect and love for Naruto only grew. Hiruzen told them of how he would handle telling Naruto of his heritage, letting him know a piece now and then the whole story upon his promotion.